John, that is in she, John did ship or less. That was the number Sunday, sure. Rumshi and the third philosophy is Ura. I pay Jevo. Let me say to Muman, but only the Rumshi the ship, got Shiva, Rumshi ship, and the other. River Kanje, Kansanta Mikago, Kansanta, the Guilta, Kansanta Kago. Or they needed ship, what that would be Rumshi of the ship. Philosophy, we love the ship, what love the ship. And then Kansan get up on Jiggy, Namdu, your nigger doing she says. And the G ship, the demon ship. But they magic ship. And a day that's a song of Canava, Missing daily life, song of daily life. What you gonna let the countries come down, country to get this some did the Shena Yavas. Tamuma number Sunday, that Rumshi dropped the J ship. And Dinane, Hansan guitar, you put it down J ship. And the net did, Susu Mezena, and this summer hundred Kange, or send the Kaiju, send a Dumay, send a Magiva. Do you work at Ula, to the Pigeon and the Shesha, some contestant would take out a vegetation ship. And Toronto is some of these towns again, and you can do it as well.
Right. Okay, so I hope you brought your brains with you because tonight's going to be a little bit tricky. So, well, truckpole, I don't know really how to translate this word, but it's going to be truckpole. So. So first we're going to talk a little bit of background behind this, and then there's the philosophy, the general, or a bit of explanation of the general Buddhist philosophy, and then there's this unique aspect to the Buddhist philosophy of these 7 aspects that refute the 7 non-views towards the self, right? I don't know, I handed out this sheet last week, but I don't know if anybody has it, but I'll read it to you, don't worry. So we're going to explain a little bit about these 7 aspects, which kind of go like they're an extra special addition on top of the general Buddhist philosophy, and then some explanation of how that's actually useful in your daily life, right? So just to recap, there's the philosophy, the 7 aspects, and then how to use them in your daily life to actually help you with your difficulties, problems, and suffering, and so forth.
Yeah, that would like the Dinjung land, Dinjung said, go to some chick, Danish chores, that the Jagan had Danish chores, down the Ravala Sanda, Danish chores, good and do like the Guladinish chores, Guladinish chores, they number Sanjay Tanjay Shigora. Do said the Guladinish chores, which is Suchigi, Delaya, so control of chair, magic sort of chair, and that you God there or the Allah there or the Akmala or the day of Maris, the day near the Maris. No Susie was Susie action damage again. Anne David Dukian Waters, Maranzo Casa King, and that. Maranzo Lobda when you music, Lobjon, Lobjana, Lobjonia, which it, Lobjonia, which it. Zindenan to do Yagunye, giving share with the Yagunye, and the Nalapado Sani, Hamagona, Susie parent family to the Yamagi, to the Kejiti, Temena, Susie Zindejival, Kejiti, Temena, Susie Togola, Kejiti, Temena, Timsa, Indian Langoja, and that Zindenan and Lavian Chazan Shevas. Lojoya, oh, Chini Midi, and Jela, the Gajury, Sigurata, Jail, Jaja Tumbolege. And a company be partying, shooting, call legal syndrome, education. What you do? I think I college you do. College, Yavujawa, Koran, resorting, legacy, Tangim, Chong. Tigaresana, Guillotine, Division, and Namshati. Over Netan, they image 지금 패지 söje 진이 근데 뭔가 산지에 켈렌지가 말해서 디다 고조서 드렸다. 와.
Okay. So the first thing we need to explain briefly is this idea of dependent origination, which is everything depends upon something else. Is every product is produced from something else, right? So every result therefore has to have a cause. Without the cause, there can be no result. Now, this cause is not, like, according to the Buddhist philosophy, is not some sort of external being like a created God, such as the Christian idea of God or Allah or the Hindu deities or anything like that, right? Whatever we experience is the result of our own previous actions. Okay, so now if we take this as an example, if there's a student and they study well, like they listen in class, then they do their homework well, if they have any questions, they clarify with their parents or the teacher, and then they'll also look things up on the internet. So basically, if they study very well, then and they graduate well, like they're successful, come top of their class or something, then based on that, then they can get a good job, and they don't have to worry about that. So it's kind of like that, based on our own efforts. Then that corresponding result will come about. It's not made by an external third party. It's not something that can be created by anybody external.
그래서 상마 데라 뭐고도 상마 문제 남샤샤디다 직시고 다 되네 상무대제다 마자처럼 찍어도다 마지 마이 뭐 dünyam 소금 뭐지는 되는 그대로 dünyam 그냥 알아서 모더로 지내샤이나 모더디 dünyam에 모더 콜로 여러 위르다 아니 인진다 아니 디루다 아니 디 다체다 다도 망고지기 아니야 dünyam에 차시에 망고지를 되네 아니 모더디 주고요랬다 디시고요 dünyam에 제 차시에 망고지를 되네 아니 거야 주고요랬다 디 차시를 되네 딘중스기 시고요.
So that's one example of dependent arising, which is the cause precedes the result. Okay. Now, with other nobo, like functional things, there can be, what we say, I guess it's like a composition, right? So it's like a composition. So that the object arrives at the same time that its compounding is completed. So, for example, if we take a car, so a car, when you have all the parts, and the windows, the doors, the body, the wheels, etc., when those all come together, then that functions as a car. So that's a simultaneous thing. It's not like the parts precede the car. When the parts come together, then the car is simultaneously existing at the same time. So as long as you have those parts in that situation, then you have a car. So this is it's an example of this composition. So it's a dependent origination, but it's not the cause preceding the result. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay. So, however, when you think about it a bit deeper, we say the car exists, but when we look at it actually how it exists, when you actually search for the car, it's not something that's actually findable, right? It's merely labeled based on, but the mind merely labels it, or speech merely labels it. So when you look at it in this way and you realize you can't find it, then that's a totally different understanding, but not so easy to grasp.
다들 상무직단도 나 아마라 되네 끼어래 봐. 그래서 아빠 아마요 결혼식으로 나 아마라 되네 끼어래. 나 춘주간에 제 차르고드네 제 텐에 제도 정대가 이제 아마라 되네 아도 스케 된 조지래샤 근데 나 주제에 그 발라다 아마라 되네 나 끼어래샤 내가 상에 하고 그래. 유단 제일 남샤는 무슨 데 녀에도 신고 그래서 상문 녀에도 미勒게지 두고 말에 금쟁고 말에 산제勒게지 두고 말에 라마勒게지 두고 말에 수수 상담 하고 나 아마라딘이 끼어요 나 파마니 게 줄이 먼저 하고 그러지 뭐 상에 챌린지기 그러다 이 녀에도 수수 규칙에 되는 되고 싶은 거지 윤대가 나샤티 냠뇽무스 녀에도 신고 수수를 투 상시당비가
Okay, so when we give an example, for example, when we think about something or say something, we think about who's saying it. So no, we're not talking externally, we're talking internally here, like I. But we can clearly see that we as a person, as a human, are born from a mother, right? And then we can see that from our childhood we gradually grew from a baby into the adults we are now, right? Now this is something we all know, right? We don't have to go around asking people. We can see this directly, Generally speaking, we should be able to see this. We don't need to go and ask our Lama, was I born from a mother? I mean, hopefully most of us know that, right? And you don't need to ask Buddha or any of these profound, it doesn't take this vast wisdom to recognize this. It's pretty basic stuff, right? So these are the kind of cause and effect realities that we can see directly, just using our intelligence. So then we can also see that we come about simultaneously in dependence on our parts. Just as we talked about the car, you can say, when my head, my arms, my legs, my body, my aggregates comes together as that composition or that composition, then at that time that's I arise at the same time, right? Simultaneously with that. Okay. And so then we can, when we look at it a little deeper, we can see that we hold like my hand, my head, etc., and we have a connection to these parts, I guess, right? So if we, like when we say, oh, my hand's hurting, you can say, I'm hurting, right? Or you can say, my head's hurting, you say, I'm hurting, etc. And the same with the emotions. You can say, I'm feeling this, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, right? If our stomach's empty, then we can say, I'm hungry, right? And for some people, okay, that's not a big deal, but some people, they miss dinner and it's like they get really stressed out about it, right? So we can see that we have a connection to all our aggregates or the parts of our composition.
다 되네마 단도 상모 띵 사고 단도 안다 두즈 상마 수고 수와 나만 저지 캘린시아 던수 다 되네 초와 필링들이 필링들이 되어요 안 되네 스스 셈나 되어요 아니 되네 아니지 스스기가 셈신다 풍고신다단 되어요 내 상당히 아니 풍고다 남시 풍고 아니 두시 풍고 대단히 다디야고 대두자리세 심리단 수수 심 되어 쉬어도 왔다데 미팅 아야 올라서 아야 올라 미팅 아 두자라서 아 두자리 삼지 이 두시에 숙청보유나 두시에 연제의 두시에 숙청보유나 삼범마디오 숙청보유고요 안데 내가 두시에 공부해서도 아니지 닝제당 참바당 세바당 대바다 두서유나 삼매조여래 아니 랑진지 아니 두자시당 공부가지 잘라서 두서 숙청보유나 마디오요 두서 마 풍봉가라 된데 아니 먼저 나다 저요 데이터 마 자셔도나 시다르에 마 띵사부사부사다나 삼모만보다야 되더라.
Okay. So this what we've talked about so far, connection on the basic level to our body and so forth. We can understand this relatively simply, right? But when we look a little bit deeper into our other aggregates, so we've talked about our connection to the body, the form, right? But we also, and the connection to the feelings. But when we get into the like the mind and the other aggregates, then you have to think about it a little bit more. So, for example, the aggregate of discrimination. So we're constantly relating to situations as positive, like good or bad, like and dislike, and so forth, like that. And so this is this aspect of discrimination. But we don't say my discrimination says this is good, says I like this. We just say I like it. So we have this connection from ourselves to this discrimination aggregate. And then it goes deep into the different states of mind, right? So if we have virtuous states of mind, compassion, so forth, then we can say our mind is peaceful and happy, right? And when our mind is disturbed by negative emotions, jealousy, anger, and stuff like that, then we say, I'm unhappy. So as we look a little deeper into it, we're actually connected to all the various aspects. We feel there's this connection between this I and the aspects of our 5 aggregates.
Das ist Mingre Euro. Und Mingde Part Mars, Mingde Taschen. Mingzam Dine. Mingzam Dine, Pumao Kanala Dine, Mingzam Kutin Jochi, Dior. The Chashe to Villa Dine, Chashemako is the danger for Ming Station Yogita, Magiota. They don't know the union around the Maju, Maya, Boyo, and the way in Atangoy, Alabinjama, Ala Togomangoy, Ala Yoro, Lajora, what day you are? The Tanya day, not the rest. They have over rest and good enough.
Okay, so now if we look at it, analyze a bit deeper, and we look at each of our 5 aggregates individually, and then we can see that, you can't say, well, I am my form aggregate. That's not the I. And so forth with the mind and the feeling and the discrimination and all of those, right? So we're not any one. We can't say that I is any one of those individual aspects on its own. And then we can't, when we look at it, it's not all of them together. All of those things, the I is not that composition of all of those parts. What it is, when you analyze, is it's actually a label upon the basis of those 5 aggregates, right? So it's merely labelled upon the basis of those aggregates. So, and when we think about ourselves, it's actually a composition of many, many things, right? Because, we think about like our aggregates, our body and mind and so forth. But then we think about my possessions, my friends, my family, all of these things. I got all this stuff, I got all these friends, I got all this family, I have this cool or crappy job, whatever you think it is. I do this, I do that, and all of these things coming together, that actually is what we kind of, all these like thousands of parts make up this I.
다이나 아주 선배나가 가르리고 그러는데 아니 말아야 돼. 방법거나 자서 야단 바지 유중원을 두대로 쌤단 저치는 매든지. 와. 아 민기 다신 좀 많이 되네 좋아 많이 단단한 도시디 톱 그걸 두대 요로시. 쌤나 대열다 맞지? 많이 있을 그지는 디 근데 나디 다 병원에 이제 요 말이야. 그 먼저 쌤나 주어때 그래서 괜히네 마음이 두제 주어줘야 면죠. 아니 단단한 도시네 톱 그걸 중된 요로시. 단단 지기로 유랑원에 줘. 유랑원에 주주대 요소시. 어디에서 지 너 남바 샤오나시 징겨. 다디 유디 유나 대바토 요고 그래서. 디유나 라시 줘 요고 요래라. 다 먼저 쌤나라 디제 나와 샤오나시 징겨. 디 녀로 상어 디서 그랬다. 뭐이 내지디 당기다 중요한 시어들이. 먼저 남바 샤야디 신다지 시작을. 진야디 신다지 징겨.
Okay.
아니 데이터가 되고요 말이에요. 야와데 대축되고요. 와. 제가 내가 진짜게 나디가 아니 하나 되면 유랑원에 주에 마시유나 템버트가 마 랑원에 주에 마 어디라고요.
Okay, so to be clear, we're not saying we don't exist. Like, we definitely exist. But the question is, how does the person or the I exist, right? Now, if we're not educated or we don't think about it, the natural tendency is to think everything exists 100% from the side of the object, right? So when these aggregates, when we perceive somebody's aggregates, we think of that person, but we don't think, oh, that's somebody merely labelled. We think that person exists, right, from its own side. So actually this kind of thinking, oh, everything exists 100% from its own side, is actually like a big mistake, right? Because what appears to us and what we actually grasp at are quite different, right? So we're imputing this, like all of these things that aren't actually there. And that's what the grasping is. So we grasp at things like truly existent, existing from its own side, inherently existent, and permanent, all of these things that aren't there, and so these are merely something that we grasp at that's nothing from the object side that's there.
Oh, that's it. 한여디에 나비. 아니 다른 신기 두 개야 말이야. 대마 두 개야 말이야. 다 엄마 텐주요로 다도 엄마 텐주요로 샤요나 란신기 두 개야 말이야. 유랑원에 두 개야 말이야. 어디시 그렇다.
Okay, so what we talk about is this merely labelled I. So from the Prasangika Madhyamika view, there's no aspect of inherent existence or true existence or existing from its own side, right? There's 100% none of that. According to Madhyamika Prasangika, the other tenets might not hold that view.
어디 남백이 따르기 보다 롭트러지래. 예시 제어 라케요 말이 뒤지네. 어디 좀 싫어. 맞아요. 맞아줘라. 상무단지 상무단지
So we're just giving kind of a broad or rough explanation because, you know, to give like a detailed explanation it'd probably take 20 years or something, right? So you guys, it's on your own to think about it for the next 20 years and figure it out for yourself, basically.
리포트한테 쉐어데 남들이 리포트 하면 돼요. 리포트는 김제 거예요. 딜레야다 주주 가상 담에 주제 남들이 리포트해요. 다들 디링한테 남들이 리포트 쉐어하고서.
Okay, so now there's many different reasonings to support this view of this non-inherent existence, non-truly existent. But today we're going to look at this 7 aspects reasoning. So, you know, there's thousands of texts with all various reasonings, but today we're going to look at that. Just these 7.
란신이 두요 말에서 다 시에고 남가 산지 란신이 두요 말에서 다 김전 두는 거 김전 두는 거 김전 담보도 가르스나 뭐 다대다 아니 풍고니 란신이 두에 찍겨요 말에서 대신 김제직 로 당도 계시 요나 야면은 지금 그래 야면은 다들 로 지금 야면은 니 야면은 야면시 요나 야면은 지금 나서 고무 요나 무 요나 야면은 고무직 야면은 밀린직 로 야면은 고무직이나 이제 텔레고잖아 고무직 텔레고니잖아 고무직 텔레고잖아 동다지 그 레고 말잖아 야야로 그래 아니 고무 매나다 지로래 그게 말이야 그래서 요나 야 고무 요나 무 요나 야면은 돌로직 야면은 돌로직 거라와서 이 인디자가 통보대 나 부분은 시도해야 말했어 매나 야면은 라지도 찍이요 그래 대요 이제 좀제 찍어 라지도 찍대요 말했어 라지도 타대대요 말했어 타대셔요 그래 요나 라지도 찍대요 그래 라지도 타대요 그래 타디 니야 말서 좀제니 도사요 그래 타디 좀제 덴버에도 돼 상당히도 돼
Okay. So when we look at these 7 aspects, so the first part is, it's set up here in like kind of a debate format. So it says, self is a subject, it is not inherently existent because. So, and then it gives the 7 reasonings why it's not inherently existent. So it's not inherently one with the aggregates, right? So if it existed inherently, if something exists, it has to exist as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? If there's nothing of that, then it doesn't exist, right? So, if you say I have some money, you have to have at least 1 cent, or $1, or $2, or $5. If your bank balance is 0, you can't go around telling people you have a lot of money, right? Because you don't have any. So it's like that. If things exist, they have to exist in either singular or multiples, right? So, and it's important to see it doesn't inherently exist as one with the aggregates, right? This inherently is very important because we're not saying it doesn't exist at all. We're just saying it doesn't. Why doesn't it inherently exist? Because it doesn't inherently exist as one. And then the next reasoning, the second part, is it doesn't. Tata, I put here separate, but it's more like different, and in this case it means multiple. So it doesn't exist as multiple with the aggregates. So there's not 5 eyes with the aggregates, for example. Right? Inherently there's not 1 eye, and inherently there's not many. So that's the first 2 reasonings. Di sumbatam shiparo.
Sumbatam shiwadi padensu ding sura chi yo ma le sura. Ranshin ji tu ja da ranshin ji phungbo la temba tang ranshin ji phungbo ten di yo ma le shi yo da.
Okay, so now reasoning 3 and 4 kind of go together, right? So so it's not inherently, I put here as a dependent, but actually probably a better translation is Tempa is the support, and then Tendu is like the supported. So it kind of works like this. If you have 2 things like that, and you take one away, this one falls. You take the other away, they both fall. So it's neither. It doesn't inherently exist in either of those ways. Supported by the aggregates, right? So it's not inherently supported by the aggregates, and the I doesn't inherently support the aggregates either. So in neither of those 2 ways, it doesn't inherently exist in either of those 2 ways, as a support for the aggregates or supported by the aggregates. Okay, so this Denba here, so Rangshingi Drupa, so inherently established by way of possessing the aggregates. So you can use this word possessing, or you can use this term endowed with, right? So what it means is we often say my arm, like we own our body, right? And my mind. So we don't, in this way, the I does not exist as inherently endowed with the aggregates or as an inherent possessor of the aggregates. That's the fifth one.
다 두번이 돼. 다 될라 나시 좀 마셔. 단위에 보는 제어시는 거. 그 풍부 속상. 다 풍부로 봐서 풍부 뒤지 뒤에 로룩 제대 요이나 디네가 마디요 말이스. 그래서 디메 빼라 가시는 거는 아주 모터 가르지는 모터 콜로다 인젠다데 줄후 말고 이제 상마야도스 토고 잡제 자잖아. 디네가 모터요 말. 어디 디셰 그거 돼.
Okay. So the first five here are dealing with the lack of inherent existence of the self, right? And then the last two reasonings are to do with the non-findability. Okay, so there's this sixth one says it's not findable in the mere collection of the aggregates. So this is the example when we if we look in our aggregates, we can't actually find the I anywhere. And it's the same here with like a car. If you have the collection of all the parts that make up a car, we can say there's a car there, but when you actually look in those parts, in that collection of parts, you can't find the car anywhere.
So when you the model yibdi model mares the lelagoda
So then the shape of the car itself is not the car. That's probably the only easy one of the whole seven, right? I think so at least you can get one of the seven, you can be happy, right? Yeah. Otherwise, when you think about the shape and then suddenly the car, that would be quite cool if you could think about a Porsche and then drive off in it. But unfortunately, no. Okay, so you have to actually think about these reasonings a lot, like go over these seven, thinking, okay, the I doesn't inherently exist as one, separate, all of these reasonings. So if you think about them again and again and again, then you can start to understand, at least logically, why the I does not exist inherently. And then when somebody asks you, you can kind of hopefully understand the reasoning behind the fact that, because it's easy just to say, I doesn't inherently exist, but you've got to have the reasoning behind it. So this, if you understand these seven, then you can clearly understand the reasoning. So when we first start to think about these seven, it's actually not such a complicated thing to understand it in like a rough kind of way. We can think, well, okay, the I doesn't inherently exist as one or many. It doesn't exist inherently supported by the base of the aggregates, and it doesn't inherently support the aggregates. It doesn't inherently own the aggregates. It's and then we look and find that it's not findable either in the collection of the aggregates or the shape of the aggregates, right? So when we get a sort of basic understanding like that, then you think about it more and analyze more, and then you can get a deeper, it's gradually deeper understanding. when you kind of get a deeper understanding, then it can actually start to shift something in the mind, right? Because when you first think about it, you're not going to get a big shift in your mental attitude. But if you think about it more and more, your understanding deepens and deepens. And then you can start to actually shift the way you look at things or the way you understand things. And this is kind of the point to it. If you don't use it to actually change your understanding a little bit, then there's not much benefit in just an intellectual exercise. Okay. So, there's no point in just sort of explaining all this to you and not telling you what the benefits of it are, right? Because, you're not going to buy anything if you don't think it's going to be useful or something cool, right? So now we're going to explain the coolness of these 7 aspects.
For example, and also this Sandan. That you manage around the Kalan Tawari Savor, Kala Savor. Kala power can Santa, Kala power can Santa. Kala Kane Chore, called Juma Muda, Kijinala, Mijik Sir, go to the Kazutan meeting. Chuzu Magic Kawina, Chuzu Chega, Magic Kawmena, Chuzu Ni. Kanaka to the Tara, we did to the Tara. Made to the Tara Mare, and it did not tomato time. And it is tomato and song that show what I'm that was a mango chick, Euro, that give you. That did my Zonganjing sometime, and Susu Legacy, the Mikazu Legacy, Mikazu transport chick, she gave them the supermarket tango, she gave them Mata, and it's only son, city or city. That Zonji, Kalan, the Zonji Chigogan, some shoji, me, Mamma, Galajar. She's a yeah, Povena, the Zonganjik de Lea. Peje, me, Yungdale, me, Ju Jonga, Lava China. Me, Ju Jonga, the New Time. Me, Ju Jonga, the Kala and Zong Toilet, the Consul Garden. The Jeburo, the Junga, the Latination. That does it, Tama. Me, the Zugi, Suzuga, Troja, Pento, Pento. Pento, and all that does it among all the Chamber. That is a quiet as in a washing girl. That Langagana is strange to that. Chicken, danger. That was some other condition for some. Simply the day, say, Levy, and Miller, same when sometimes you would lay a shame petty cursor. Also, Mijizodi, Tatomucharo, Kaut Society Charo. Young gay, your marry, hallows here, your marry, respect your marry. That animal the Charo. That's some of the days you in it, they were said, simply. Oh, that is a malcadation. And the sound down, you meet the Susan, cow down. Susan, listen down you, the leg rock. Tilena, Susan, Nala, me, Mango, Tanya, your focusing down. Galicia Mango, your. Did you did you go? Got some down in a show down the Tarang, it seemed to come and say, like, some said over there. Taran, Geo Gomar, Geo Tamas of Gomar, Taran.
So when we think about dependent arising, and we understand that everything results and causes, this should establish a certain confidence in our mind, right? for example, if we do the prerequisite steps, we can actually develop all these advanced states of mind like bodhicitta, emptiness, realizations of emptiness, everything like that, because if we create the causes, then it will produce the result, right? Also, to give an example of just a simple thing, like when we, for example, when we all eat, right? I assume we all eat. So we all eat, and like when we eat, we tend to just stuff our face and not really think about it. But if we actually take a minute to think about it, how many people worked to get the food? So, for example, if we have Sunday lunch here, right? Then, a lot of people put in a lot of effort to bring it about. So first somebody had to cook the food. And if it's a good cook, maybe it takes them half an hour. If it's a bad cook, maybe it takes them 2 hours, right? So, and then you got to think about, well, of course they didn't just magic the tomatoes out of thin air, right? They needed to collect all these ingredients. So somebody had to do the shopping, which meant they had to drive back and forth, fart around in the supermarket for a while collecting all this stuff, right? So then, if we think about this, there's many kind of seeds that came together, and many people worked a lot to just so we could eat, right? Now, if we think about this in terms of, like the kindness of others, right? So just like it may be all up, I mean, you can go back indefinitely to growing the vegetables and all of that, but like say 10, 15 people came together to bring this food, right? And then, so if we think about that, and then when we meet strangers, we don't, like, if we think about it, there's many ways they could potentially have been kind to us, right? You don't know what they do and how they probably, kind of, especially in a small place like Nelson, helped you out in some way or another, right? But these days, the thinking's not really like that. We have this kind of cold society where people don't really interact with each other, they don't really smile at each other, they don't really kind of think about the sense of like a positive community so much. And when you get like this, you get kind of like this isolated sort of attitude, and then you can develop some quite negative views towards others. So if we can shift that type of thinking and think about, this way that through dependent arising people kind of help us out and how we wouldn't be able to live this life without them, and we remember their kindness, then life becomes much easier because you're constantly surrounded by friends. If you remember the kindness of people, you naturally like people, and then you have many friends, and and this is something we can do right now. It's not like you have to go off and meditate in a cave or study for 20 years. You can actually do this kind of thing. It's not that complicated. We can actually do it right now.
아들아 특히 chance 저한테 유튜브에 나면 준중 책지를 직 유로 이제 라고 미기 셈제 따나 서로 미기 셈제 와 셈제 미 다들 아니 대단히가 되네 다 대줄을 되네 아니 산제님도 주로 미 셈제를 따는데 셈제 두줄을 되네 아 산제니 고마도 고요래 미기 셈제 따나 대단히가 산제님도 들어도 장시 참배습니다 제가 다 산제 공방 셈제를 들을 토고에는 다 콘서 거리 좀 알아 이제 다 두즈 상 말아 거리 좀 버리 삼배네 두즈 상 아직 대화시 되러시나 두즈를 동해로시나 동해도 파세로시나 삼배 어떤 상무들 내지 강복하나 기나리 시민나리 미나리 가래 토고에나 상무 다란다고 밀다운데 그러는 상무 땅 제가 저는서 말에 이지로 제 바로 제 있는 니저 두즈 땅고 에모네 사만남다 로가 쇼라 봐 이제 하나 가데 나 책도 된 거에 당고 셈나니 미지 토고다 랑산 책도 상 미기 심제단다 다 두줄라 되는 거 심제다 아다 두줄 대화시 들으시 동해를 매면서 상로 대단계 메시지 미들 lumbakhne 미디 민가리니 미디를 쓰게 뭐 가리니 미디 스페셜에 가리니 대 나라 가리 팬도 거이나 영어서 최저로 가리 팬도 거이나 상로 보나 당겨요 제상 당면이네 제가 네 가리 팬 거라서는 당보거나 미들라야지 수수원에 저리도 미페죠 상상라 대심다 녀차 상상라 바로 상상 채우는 근데 상상 파트 상상 안다디 먼저 릴레이션십 이제도 우신주기 된다 잼제도 예 상상은 초대요 상상은 그 빼줄래로 툭틀래 저 말을 걸어 툭툭 제라 상상은 쉬울까를 상상은 파로 치료 개엄을 이거를 파로 치유를 수수 셈나네 가들이나 줄래고 수수 셈나네 가들이나 쓴다니 올래대라 다디 빼내 가셔 버려야 식드지 로세 하고세
So, I don't know if I'm going to get an exact translation, so I might be able to paraphrase it. Over here, right? But he says the object is sentient beings, and based on this object, that's how we're are able to attain enlightenment through the object of sentient beings, right? So therefore, because of this reason, they are incredibly kind to us, because without them, we couldn't attain enlightenment, right? So if we remember this, right, so if we think about, see all sentient beings as kind, then things go very harmoniously. If we don't, if we kind of, somebody does something we don't like, and then we say something back to them, and then, we cause each other suffering back and forth, and you kind of live in this conflict kind of state with others and also in your own mind, then that's no benefit to anybody. So rather, there's two ways of thinking. When you meet somebody, you can see them as kind, and then naturally, based on that, you think, well, what can I do to help you, right? Or when you meet somebody, you can try and think, oh, well, what can I get out of them? Well, how they can help me, or how can they help my situation or the centre or something like that, right? But you're basically thinking, well, what can they do for me or my situation, right? So when, in this world, like relationships generally are not that stable, right? So, sometimes you might be great friends or have, very close to somebody, and then, sometimes a year or even a week later, then you split apart, and then you're close to somebody else, and then come together and apart like this. And it's just it's kind of like a child, Sometimes they come up and then they'll go off, wander off to another person and want to play with them, and this is kind of how relationships actually work, right? So rather than thinking, I want to be with this person and they don't want to be with me, and then you kind of, okay, that never works out well, right? You can see anybody you come across. If you can have this idea that anybody you encounter is incredibly kind, and then you can forge like a very positive relationship with them, then, that's very beneficial. Okay, so now if we look at this dependent arising in the law in terms of the law of cause and effect, right? So karma, cause and effect. If you don't have a basic understanding in the idea of actions and their results, but you go around saying, I'm going to meditate on emptiness, well, basically you're just having a laugh, right? You're just wasting your time. If you can't have a basic understanding of karma, cause and effect, but you think you're going to realize emptiness, good luck, basically. Yeah, no, that's not smart. Right. Right, okay, so this has never happened in the past, that somebody didn't understand the law of cause and effect and realize emptiness, and it's never going to happen in the future, right? If you can't understand the law of cause and effect, then emptiness is like, forget about it, basically. Okay, so if you can prove him wrong, if you can prove him wrong, then you're welcome to come up to the complaints department and say your piece. Right. So if you can be the first person to realize emptiness without understanding law of cause and effect, then you're going to be like the most famous person in the history of Buddhism, like more famous than Buddha or Nagarjuna or any of these people, right? Because you've actually literally done the impossible.
photo relationship in a company working in a high in a Kangi Yosa de la Yujima in the DNA, any Kangi the Chungi your emission. Chick must search and use in dead. Yama, you single chick do it to my Yama. You manguer, call it. Ye manguer, call it. To just Hama, I was a shembache. I did the Yabore to Jara, get it lavin, and I will. Or did another and who sometimes 어떤 말씀 주시는 강에 마주 열어봐 그 동해 열어봐 그때 가내중 어도 주지 내게 미디 미 당보들은 미지 나와샤고 어디 사람은 수수는 주체요 수수 아다 기사 내 딩면도 딩해는 주리샤 밀러 농디하면도 상네 수수삼 수수라 셈서 당도 아 다데 밀러라 하면도 딩 하나는 주리 다데 밀러 하면도 다데 얘는 주리해서 아니 수수마 심디마 there's emotion ma charo mi mangbo ge emotion ge ne practice che ko esi do o jude sam ta chi emotion ma sa ma shambo jude sam ta.
So if we look at this cause and effect on another level, we can see that things also come about not necessarily just based on one simple cause, but a collection of many things, right? So, for example, to have like a Buddha center here, then it's not like just one person waved a magic wand and this whole thing just appeared and it just runs like that, right? You need a lot of people. You need a director, you need a teacher, you need a translator, you need, all the people that come together to make this thing happen, right? It's not just one person can just make a large endeavor like this come about, right? And it's the same in, normal daily life. If there's a large company that has thousands of employees, it's not just the managing director or the owner that makes it all happen. It's a collection of many people coming together. And everything is like this. Like anything that comes together from a collection of many causes. Because our experience is the same, right? If we like unhappy about a situation, right? Or just unhappy in general, then we need to look at it. If we just think, it's just because of one singular thing, right? Or one singular action of one person that caused us to be massively unhappy, then it's not being realistic. We have to look back, right? And if we actually look at the situation with some sort of clarity, often we can find that, it's not just one thing this person did. There's a number of actions, and often you can find within it that you yourself weren't perfect in the situation, right? And maybe you made some mistakes yourself. And even just recognizing that you made a mistake and taking responsibility from that immediately can help start to settle the mind, just that simple action, right? Then the mind calms and becomes a bit more settled just based on that alone.
디지라디 미직 로야 야만 내가 미망고 수수예 기단 시민 중에 되어요. 수수 기단 시민. 아니 수수지 고유도 장마 봐. 나서 최소 예도 장마에 대녀도 기우도 봐. 칠로네 산이말에 님에도 최소 배 장마도 기우도 라고도. 제단디 장마선이 그 계좌니다 가된답니다. 아니 강바 기웅치니다. 두저기 가리로. 두저가 되려라. 두저가 되려. 가시에게 라고도 나. 이제는 대표도 지난 터지지 말라라기 나 터지지 말라. 터지지 고도 내가 진이도 들라. 미가시에 말라 내라고도 터지지 배사지 말이 터지지 말라야 말아. 나 내라 기우지 되니 기우지 갈아서 계좌 말에 자탁 말에 몇도탁 말에 기우지 되니들 해서 나 되나. 내가 내 제야 말에 내가 진이면 volunteer다 콘도 되니도 저기 콘도 로마와 다니 콘도 요레스 콘솔라 콘도 텐텐주 콘솔라 나 말라스 나 디교든데 라고 콘도 가데데 메시지 내가 데 말아 나 데라 저거서니 아유.
So it's the same, when we feel happy, sometimes we think, all this happiness just comes about through like the sound of my own awesomeness and then it magically appears, right? But it doesn't actually work like this, right? anything that we experience that makes like happy, for example, comes together through the work of many people. Like, for example, the centre, like people come here, this is Geshe's experience, people come here and say, oh, the centre's so beautiful and it's really nice, and when I'm here my mind's peaceful and it's a beautiful place. But this doesn't just happen, this comes about through the kindness of all the people who kind of maintain the gardens, who build it, who do everything to make it come together. And sometimes people say to Geshe, oh, thanks so much, you've made a beautiful centre. He's like, don't thank me, like I'm just chilling out here, You've got to thank the people that actually do the work to make the centre kind of come together in this way, right? So there's all the gardeners, etc., and all of that make it happen, He says, it's like people thank me, but that's just ridiculous because I just sit here and enjoy it all the same. Right, I'm just like the beneficiary of this. I don't do any of the work.
가원치니 미망고도 수술라 참보치니 수술라 까린치니 미망고도 상관도 딜라데네 론리네스 메어자가 스트레스 메어자가 anxiety 메어자가 두 상황 용으로 그래 단데 저저 강에도 왔다 그래 지사 데브 지상당한데 다수지 예 메도서 배 까리치 뭐 나도 참보치니 나도 펜토니 망고도 상관도 레벨이나 아니 초보 망고도 초보도 초무도 망고도 아니 loneliness 요하면도 loneliness면 stress 요하면 anxiety 요하면 근데 도즈면 아니 야고도 알아.
So when we can see this interconnected relationship of all things, so how things arise in mutual dependence on each other. Now, if we have a clear understanding of this, naturally we have to see the kindness of others, right? If we clearly understand this, it comes naturally that we see the kindness of others. And when we start to see the kindness of others, it changes our whole attitude to other people. And then all these other things, feelings of loneliness and stress because people aren't doing what we want and all this, they're no longer there because the relationship with others changes completely. So if you can kind of understand this cause and effect, and then through that come to understand the kindness of others, then you have a lot of friends, and of course you develop kindness in yourself to others. You develop empathy. Then naturally you'll have a lot of friends. You won't experience these kind of feelings of loneliness and isolation or any of that anymore.
다드네. 다드부 나 계산을 되네 좀. 괜히만 나 아마도 바울네 끼어라데. 아니 교도한테 타고다. 교도한테 그 미다고 임바데 하고도다. 와. 얘들 당저 세미나를 가래. 계산은 괜히만 찍어인 거. 따고진 거. 당고지. 아니 가시 시야 권한 친구. 말인데 디는다 배샤망고 사 배샤망고 써야라 상냐냐 단지. 그래서 여어디 비주마다 매체 단도 니 제가 단도 와 가래 먼저 딜러기로 미가시 로트라 밀린징 로트들라 양자 로트라 하야라 배전죠 꾸버라 여어디 배전죠라 양자 로트도지 다 밀린징라 사이드 배전야고 제전디고라 양자 로트도 꾸버라 나 뭐지 뭐여라 근데 로디 라디오인데 여러 단도 빼셔서 뭐네 진짜 팁 차시하고 그 이제 뮤직이고 대신 디고라 여말 나라서 당지 왕기 시야 말하나 가보다 그래 그래서 윤대 남샤드 마시나 당지 도통 말이야 근데 신다 동반이도 하셔 믿어도 도통 말해
Okay, so now we move on to the aspect of impermanence, right? So we can see on a gross level, we can understand impermanence. For example, we were born, And then pretty much we know we grew up, right? Like we can see we came from a baby to growing to being a young child, then a teenager, then an adult, and so on. So we can see this impermanence logically, but this is not what, when we think about ourselves, we actually hold on to it as permanent. It's a natural instinct to think of ourselves as permanent. Like we don't, we think of the person we were yesterday as the same as we are today. Now, logically, we can say, oh no, we're changing, but that's not how we hold on to us, right? We hold on to ourselves as something permanent. And then based on this thinking of permanent, then all these other things extrapolate out from that, right? Well, then we have this want to make money, right? And, realistically, everybody needs some money. But, there's people out there and they struggle and they kind of get like $1 million together, right? They get $1 million in the bank. But immediately then they think, well, now that I've got 1 million, I need 2. And Geshe says, well, that's a bit stupid, really. You worked so hard to get $1 million. Surely now you should be chilling out with your $1 million. But no, immediately your mind just goes to wanting more and trying to seek more and more and more. Whereas actually, you should relax. Like you've got, maybe now $1 million is not enough. I had this discussion with him before. So let's say 10 million, right? Yeah, he seems to think he'll be completely happy with $1 million, but if I want to be completely happy, I need 10 million, right? So since I'm talking, it's got to be 10 million.
Never.
Anyway, so let's say you got 10 million, right? And now you got your houses and your cars and all this stuff.
And you 1 million.
Okay. All right, I have to say what he says. So 1 million's enough. So you've got 1 car and maybe half a house. So anyway, but you should be happy with your $1 million, right? And you shouldn't be thinking that, you should be using that to make a good, comfortable situation rather than always seeking more and more and more. But the more we have this strong sense of self-grasping, then, the more we kind of grasp at things and the more we get caught up in these meaningless kind of pursuits, right? So also, there's part 2. So you know how we said you can't understand emptiness without cause and effect? Well, guess what? You can't understand it without understanding impermanence either.
If you got 10 million, I think you're wanting more, maybe 15 million. Yes.
I don't know, bro.
You said, easy to make 15 more. And you're making more, making money, jump.
Well, honestly, Geshe, I don't think I'm ever going to find out if that's true or not.
Ask lots of millennia people, what is your experience, And they said, past their thought, maybe $500,000 then I'm bad life making very simple life. Then they'll go to $1 million. Then there's maybe $2 million. Then $2 million, 3, 4 million, 5 million, more like that, They said, I met lots of those people. I asked their COVID experience. I thought, yeah. Ending, wanting, desire.
Really,
This is really desire. Good example. We don't worry. 미직 테스트는 아니 대 주제 대가 망고 쓰제 아니 좀 파다 파 메시지단 수 메시지단 등산 소셜 서비스나 등으로 하셔서 그죠 당연히 하시나 대 수요 너를 잡고 대 먼저 나스데 강 때문에 이게 직 도와지지 이 자세 풍부한 거질라 때네 두대 좀 많이 도와지도 더더러지 아 약고 쉬셔요 아 배야고이 유진 또 말해 나라 독도 독대요 유진 때는 다 유진 먹고 때고 다 되나라 유진 가시 야가요 가시 누구요 딱 한대나 삼 남산 밀로 두고 말아 먼저 남산 밀로 두고 해야 되가서는 수수배 야고 쉬지 뭐 손나요 수수 단대배 장마당장 야고 이 사람 나대라 아니 만들기 미래 파주도 다 수수를 주고 대디 같은 것은 다 수상 당하는 신나 제가 배 보스라고디 내요다 디네마 얘도 유네라게 수바버서 해야 돼 sabjari jingres di gyawla minijara de sa goras ping ane dine ma da lega chini rawz ne deja shida kondo ngaje jala si tuzu lega chini tuzu lega cheje ane ngzoro dumeso wa da ngzo dumra so we na de soe do da da wa pijara so we na longye do so we na ning jo soe do de
Okay. So now if we look at the lack of inherent existence of the self, right? So if people don't clearly understand a situation, then they can really easily get caught up in conflict with others, right? So, one person does something you don't like and then that escalates and it goes up and up until the police or social services or something like that gets involved, right? Because the situation can easily get totally out of control. But when you actually realize that the root of all the problems comes from within your own mind, this self-grasping, self-cherising attitude, this kind of thought that where you think, I'm right, I'm in the right, I'm right, and you base every action on that, then that's a natural cause to have a lot of conflict, right? But when you actually think that any situation comes about through many causes and conditions and everything coming together, and you can approach things with a much more peaceful mind, a much calmer and more peaceful attitude, then the situation can be completely different, right? So, when we look at our mind, at the moment, it kind of works like this. It's like the boss is this kind of self-grasping attitude, this grasping I, and then you get the supervisor is the self-cherishing attitude, and then you get all the workers, which are all your delusions like jealousy and anger, and they go out and do all sorts of ridiculously stupid things and create all sorts of problems, right? So this is kind of, like Geshe likes this example because he thinks it's quite apt to our situation.
당지당 담에도 왜 셔라 파지 다리자죠라
Okay.
일단 당지가 뭐래 sabasmi 담에도 왜 셔라 지난 얘가 더 말해서 콜라 배로 오만 거에 되자 셔당 공도 나게 아니 심지 탐지에 콜라 잡죠시 그랬어 가시 나라 더 나거나 지금 말했어 당지를 더 나거나 지금 신나바지 란지딜레 더 나 지금 말은 런진으로 런진 수바바들레 더 나지니 요말 잡죠데 그랬어 콜라 사보테 되게 요랬어 사보테 빼망고 요랬어 먼저 vote 서로 vote 루나 담에도 왜 싫어 쇼그래 단지 토그래라고 콜라 심지 탐지 단지 잡요 토그래라고 됐다고 요랬다 근데 이상 망설어 망설 왜 루나 단지 토그
So at the moment you kind of got this kind of world title fight between self-grasping and the wisdom realizing selflessness. But unfortunately, the wisdom realizing selflessness is kind of on its own in the corner, and is not really, it's a bit malnourished and hasn't been working out much, whereas the self-grasping has got all these delusions around and self-cherishing in the corner, and, it's been well-fed and is pretty buff and is ready to rumble, right? So it's kind of unfortunately it works like this. And if you kind of put this to the vote, even it's if you ask everyone who's going to win out of self-cherishing or this wisdom realizing selflessness, self-grasping, then everybody go, oh yeah, self-grasping wins immediately because that's all everybody, basically most people know, right?
담에도 왜 싫어 콜라 덴바 요새 그래 덴바를 제가 더 그랬어 담에도 왜 싫어 truth 콜라 요새 저는 true 요 말해 된 내가 디펜딩가 좀
Okay, but yeah, one thing that this wisdom realizing selflessness does have its own side is that it's got the truth, right? So self-grasping is like a politician with no truth behind it. And self-cherishing, the wisdom realizing is somebody who has the truth behind him. So I don't know if you can say wisdom realizing selflessness is the Green Party, but that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Draw me top down. Draw me top down in your draw me top down in the diamond of a share of this. Business politics time the data, Sagwas being Japio Janare. Dano Tom Nature, someone is.
So you have like you can use this analogy if I can actually translate it. Anyway, like without laughing too much. All right. So you have your wisdom, religion, selfish, and that's like all the onto it people, right, over here. And then all the stupid people are like Donald Trump and George Bush and all these people are they're the self-grasping attitude.
No, the good
No, he's dead. What's the new one?
Kim Jong his son. Kim Jong president.
Kim Jong-un. Yeah, Kim Jong-un. So Kim Jong-il down to Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
Kim Jong-un. Yeah. So this is not a big fan of Kim Jong-un.
Xi Jinping.
Well, what is Xi Jinping, the Chinese president? He's like the king of self-grasping. Yeah, but watch out, the truth is coming for you. One day you'll have to change. Right. So the Dalai Lama's wisdom is like the wisdom realizing emptiness. Slowly it might drill its way in there, but we'll see. Employee.
Jealousy, anger, those things are.
So, you know, he said he likes this analogy because he actually thinks about this analogy of a business. So you have the CEO, which is the self-grasping. Then you have middle management, which is like self-cherishing, right? And then you have all the employees, like they're all the delusions, and their job is to go out there and make things as difficult for everybody else as possible, right? So this is actually how it kind of works.
니마니마게 셈디마 시버서 오요레 니마니마 아니 니마직 니마니 둔다직 둔다니도 아니 셈디시오 아니 메지직 셈시오 아니 메지니 셈시오 those two 메시지가 데라 베데 녀오다 잔잔세제 톱디컬이야 산제서도 된대요 말이지.
So, you know, you need to reflect on these kind of reasonings a lot, right? Again and again to actually get some real benefit from them. So, you know, the point of this is, you know, you should listen well and then you should study and these things. But the idea of that is to gradually bring more and more peace to your mind, peace and calmness and these good qualities to your mind on a daily basis. And if you can gradually do that, like gradually develop your mind one step at a time, right? Then you can have some success. But to just think about, like, you know, you're in this kind of completely messed up mental state and it's all chaotic, and then suddenly you just jump up to Buddhahood. There's no, like, massive springboard you can jump on, right? You have to climb the stairs one by one. I think you guys probably got that. I don't know how to translate ping.
What did Kama say? He you know, if you don't have kindness, loving, you similar cow grew like that, and he said you need translator. And translator says you need ping.
I think I'll have have to work on my ping. It's not.
Understand.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you guys happy with my ping? No, my ping's not good enough. Okay, so we'll stop here.